let's continue. Try to finish this part. We have finished the 3 modes. We've come to the 4th mode. This is, after understanding reality, now you have to make sense out of, all the data, the research that you have done. What does it mean, right? So that's why we call it train insights. Out of the 5 mindsets, one mindset is looking for patterns. At that time, your mindset should be looking for patterns, right? Lots of data that you have collected from the field. What kind of pattern? What kind of groupings? Where are the hot spots? What are the big problems that I need to address? And that's what's called patterns. So you have to do that in an abstract sense. You have to train your mind to find out those big patterns from research. So that's what needs to happen. So typically what we do is, you take the post-it notes as a team, write down insights, write down what you have learned from research by observing people and asking people. Write down something that you have learned. We call that insight. Insight is something new that you have learned from research. Write down all that, and as a team, these are students, in our school, working together as a team, trying to find out patterns, and put up those post-it notes and insights on the whiteboard and group them together, put the related insights together, and there's a group there. And all our insights are in a particular group. That's a big, you have to pay a lot of attention to that. So that's how, normally this simple clustering exercise that you do, clustering, like grouping. And you have all this data, you group them and look at the big groups. And that's one way to get at patterns. Another way to get at patterns are, many of the engineers are familiar with this interaction matrix, right? Interaction matrix, or sometimes we call affinity matrix. That's a technical term. So we use tools like this. You take the insights. Now there's several insights, about 99 insights. This is from a project that we did on cooking appliances. The project was on cooking appliances. We studied, we looked at kitchens and how people cook, and all of insights came, 99 of those. And we created a matrix by relating each insight with the other insights. Oh, if this insight is similar to another insight or not. If they are similar, put a high score. That's what is normally happens in a relationship matrix. If you are an engineer, you are familiar with this kind of tool, right? Then you realize clusters, right? Out of all the 99, maybe about 10 insights clustered together. So what does that mean? What does the group of clusters mean? That's how you find out patterns, right? In this particular case, those are the 9 clusters that came out of 99 insights, and we started naming them. What do those clusters mean? Name them, understand those clusters. That itself is a very good exercise to understand the problem. Say, for example, this cluster of insights is all about enhancing social relationships. Even though the project was on cooking appliances, a lot of insight that we learn from people are about enhancing social relationships. What does it mean? Cooking is not just about cooking. Even in all the cultures, I'm pretty sure in Korean culture is also, cooking is not just cooking for the sake of making food. It's more of a social activity. Cooking, a lot of people do that so that they can bond or interact socially. They involve children in the cooking. Moms want children to be part of the cooking process so that there's an interaction going on. Not just about cooking, it is about why do we go to restaurants to eat, right? It's not just eating, the experience of spending time with your friends, right? So cooking also is the same way. So that big cluster. So if this is the project done for a client on appliances, right, cooking appliances. So if I have to design an appliance, then obviously that I have to pay attention to that cluster. How does an appliance support people cooking together or social relationships, right? For example, if you look at our ovens today, you have the oven in front of a wall, right? It is meant for one person cooking, right? Take the oven out of the wall, move it away from the wall, put it in a central location, and design it that people can walk around and use it. Then a group of people can stand around the oven and start cooking, right? That itself is a simple idea to address that idea of that cluster of enhanced social relationships. So similarly, I can take this into my brainstorming session and create ideas for each one of those 9 clusters. That's a good exercise to come out with new appliance ideas, new innovations. Explore concepts. Once you have that, then you have to explore concepts. That's when idea generation happens. That's when, I'm pretty sure many of you may have done brainstorming session, right? Brainstorming session is a group of people sitting together and thinking about ideas together, right? Talking about ideas and sketching out ideas and writing them. So it's a brainstorming session. That's a typical example of exploring ideas. But one of the mindsets is, this is interesting, standing in the future. We don't practice that many times. The mindset is not, I call it standing in the future. When you think about ideas, you're thinking about future, right? This idea will work in the future. You're imagining a future and thinking about an idea. Say, earlier we saw the presentation of wind turbines, right? Wind turbines, not just a wind turbine, they visualized a future that had all these tree-like structures that are wind turbines that will add an interest to the city, right? That's the visualization of that future. So similarly, here we have to stand in that future. I'm going to use an example. How do you think about ideas standing in the future? So in order to illustrate that, there are 2 ways to think about the future. One way is, let's say, this is my current position. This is my current now, right? You call it now. So I look around, oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem here. I can fix all that, and then, once I fixed it, I have a future, right? So looking at current problems and then fixing it will be a future solution. That's going from present into the future, right? That's one way. And the other way is reverse it. Reverse it means I'm standing in the future, but I'm not going to look at my problems at all. I'm blindly going to an ideal future. Blindly going into an ideal future, think about what that ideal future is, and then looking back at the current situation and see how I can get there. That's a reverse process. So I'm going to illustrate it through simple example. Your career planning. All of you do career planning, right? After graduation, you want to get a job, right? You want to think about what career you want, right? One way to do career planning is think about stand in the present and think about what are my strengths today. Graduation. I did my graduation. I did my let's say degree on product design. I'm pretty good at model making, right? That is my strength. How can I apply my skill, my strength, model making? Look for jobs where I can fit in for model making. That's one way to think about careers, right? The other way to look about careers is that think about the present and then think about the future steps that you can take, move into the future as a career. But the other way is simply think about 25 years down the line, what do I want to become? Don't think about your current strengths. 25 years down the line, or 30 years down the line, when I'm in that 30-year time, what do I really want to become? What should I be doing? And think about that scenario, that future, and then look back and think about jobs that will get me there. In 30 years, I want to reach that goal. And think about jobs that will get me there in 30 years' time. Right? That's a different way of thinking. So can we practice that as a standing in the future? Normally, standing in the future produces breakthrough ideas. Breakthrough ideas. Standing in the present and going to the future, you are only fixing problems. You are only creating incremental innovations. You are only creating improvements. Whereas standing in the future will give you completely new innovations, breakthrough innovations. That's the advantage of that. So simple tools that we use to exercise that is this. We call it a concept generating matrix. This is a matrix that helps you think about ideas. Right? Supposing if you're, you think about factors here. Supposing you're doing your cooking appliances project, right? You're cooking, eating, cleaning, and all kinds of factors that you need to think about, right? And think about some of the factors here for your project, and in each of those cells, think about ideas, sketch out ideas, right? So in this particular case, what we do is to practice standing in the future. Think about these factors and think about long term first. Right? Long term. You take the time scale there. The future looks like long term. Long term means 20 years, 30 years down the line. Mid-term is maybe 5 to 20 years. Short term, now to 5 years. Now to 5 years short term, 5 to 10 years mid-term, and 10, 20 years beyond that is long term. So you're forcing us to think about the long-term ideas first. We do that first, right? Think about long-term ideas first for each of those factors. For cooking, how does an appliance look like for supporting cooking? What should it look like 20 years down the line? What is the ideal cooking device after 20 years? Think about that first, and then think about the midterm, and then think about the short term. We feel that will take you to really breakthrough kind of innovations. Framing solutions. Exploring a whole lot of ideas is good, but ultimately you have to think about which ideas can I really implement. Some of the ideas may be useless. I can throw away some of those ideas, right? Useless ideas. Some of them are very critical, and some of them in combinations work very well. That's what we call framing innovation, framing solutions. So there are two things happening there. You have ideas generated in your project. Two things you have to do. One is evaluation. Evaluation is judging. Which ideas are really high value idea, which is a low value idea. Judgment, evaluating, which is a good idea, which is a bad idea. So you are using your judgment at that time. And secondly, you have to do what you have to do is systemizing. After evaluating ideas and recognizing the best ideas, now you combine them. Combine those ideas into one holistic solution, one full solution, right? So, for example, the Boeing aircraft, right? If you have really created the Boeing airplane, you have to implement so many ideas, seating ideas, communication ideas, right? The boarding ideas and the form factor, all kinds of ideas combined into one big solution, right? So similarly, we also have to practice that. That's what's called systemizing. Right? So those two things we have to do. So evaluation, here is a tool that we use for evaluating ideas, right? You have hundreds of ideas, you list all those ideas here, and you use two measures, user value and business value. User value and business value. Take each idea and does it have a lot of user value or less user value? Business value means value to the company. Value to the company. Can it produce a lot of profit or not? Something like that. That's what's called business value. So you judge those two criteria. Of course, to judging those value criteria, you can create sub-criteria. User value actually means easy to use and convenience and things like that. Convenience, easy to use, low price. You can create sub-criteria for user value. That's what you see there. But ultimately, what it says that take the user value and business value columns and plot them on a map. plot them on a map. Take the user value and plot them here, right? These are low user value, high user value. Business value, low business value, high business value. And plot all those, or each of those dots are these ideas plotted here. So you can see the distribution. It's a simple mapping tool. So what we would do is focus here, right? This corner. Those are the best ideas. This evaluation tool, evaluation is a way to recognize which are the best ideas and which are the bad ideas, right? This group may be a bad idea because they are low user value and low business value. So I will not focus much here. I'll put my entire focus on developing those ideas. So that's an evaluation tool working there. Did you get that? Do you understand that? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So that's one, and systemizing is combining ideas. The same map could be used to combine ideas. For example, this 5 ideas will work together as a unit. Right? That has been done judgmentally actually. As a team, we stand in front of these dots and think about which combination will really work in the real world with our own knowledge about the real world. So that's what is happening there in systemizing. And finally, the last one is realizing offerings. Right? Once you have the idea, solution developed, now you have to make them real in practical life. So here are some mindsets. I'm just highlighting 2 mindsets. One is implementing in reality, and the other is reiterating prototypes. Let's look at those 2. Implementing in reality, especially when we talk about the convergence between technology and design, that they have to converge. We have to create multidisciplinary teams, designers, engineers, business people, and finance people. All of them will have to work together as a team to implement a final solution. And everyone will have to participate in the implementation process. So that's what happens in that tool. So this tool is used this way. You think about your solution that you want to initiate, implementable solution. Oh, this solution is what I want to implement, right? Create a team based on that, bringing people from various departments. You have your organization, you have marketing department, sales and finance and all kinds of departments in your organization, right? So for that idea to be implemented, there has to be an engineer, a finance person, maybe 2 marketing people and a research person to make that idea really successful. So you create a plan. It's called a teaming plan, right? Once you create a plan, that team can take on the implementation. So that's one way to ensure that the fusion or the convergence happens. Because ideas cannot be implemented only by engineers. That's a wrong decision. It may not succeed. It cannot be implemented only by designers. It won't succeed. It cannot be implemented only by the business people. It won't be successful. We have to create the multiple perspective. That's where this teaming plan really helps in the convergence of innovations. Prototyping. Prototyping is another mindset in this final implementation. Prototyping is making models and testing it out, right? More number of prototypes, the better. Don't wait for, if you have an idea to come to a final stage before you make a prototype. Can you prototype many times before you come to the final solution? Classic example of that is how the Wright brothers, when they invented the aircraft, and they invented the first airplane, they went through hundreds of prototypes, one wing, and then they will test out another kind of wing, they will try, keep failing, but they learn from those failures, and hundreds of prototypes are made before they came to the first flying plane, right? So more number of prototypes, the better. Faster prototyping is better, so that you don't make the mistake. And if you wait for the prototype to the last stage, if you made a mistake in the beginning, the entire thing fails, right? Whereas if you make more prototype, failure is okay. failure is acceptable. So I'm going to skip some of these. There are too detailed, but there are four principles that we can use to prototype itself. If you're prototyping, think about these principles. You have to provide some kind of a context. Right? Prototype should have some kind of an assimilation or some kind of a context in which you are testing it out. It should create an experience. The prototype should have an experience. And prototyping is about building to learn. So failure is okay. Prototype is not all the time meant for success. Failure is okay. You can learn from failures too. Prototype fails. Why did it fail? That's a learning, so that you can take the next step. So build to learn. Right? Prototype building is about learning. And finally, support conversations. Prototype is the moment you have a model or a prototype, it will support conversations. People can immediately respond to a model. Whereas if you show a report to a person, to someone, people cannot talk about the report. But when you see something, oh, that's wrong, that's cool, that's better, right? So you get a conversation around prototypes. That's a good thing. Right? There are different types of prototypes that we make. I think we can skip that. So to winding up the process, we have talked about these 7 modes, the mindset, some of the tools, some of the methods that will help. But the process is probably not very linear. It doesn't happen very smoothly, step by step. In real life, it's kind of non-linear process. While you're doing research, sometimes you come out with ideas. You sketch out an idea, right? That's a later part of the process. So you're moving back and forth between all the parts of the process. It's not really linear. You have to understand that. And it is iterative. Iterative means you do one circle, create a prototype, test it, and then do another circle, another prototype, 3 or 4 circles for the prototype before you pilot it, before you launch it, right? So it is an iterative process that we have to go through, which we have to be ready, even though the process is structured. It's not linear, it's not just one linear process. So we have to be aware of that. But it is good to have that, 7 modes and the methods toolkit, so that I can, it's almost like a carpenter's toolkit, right? A carpenter, when he wants to build a chair, he will pick the right kind of tools to make a chair. If you want to build a house, he will pick a different set of tools to build a house, right? So similarly, this is innovator's toolkit. If you have a method, collection of all these methods for you, you can select the right kind of tools for the right kind of project that you're using. So you should be prepared to add your own methods and tailor it to projects, and make it tailorable to projects. So that's the advantage of having a toolkit. So the last section, let me go to, so you got a sense of the process and the principle, right? Even though it takes more time. Our students study this for 2 years or 3 years before they become an expert on applying all these. So it's not an easy task to become an expert on all these. It takes a little while. But you got a sense, right? So let's look at an example project in which some of these tools have been applied. And I'm going to take an extreme project, kind of unfamiliar to you. I'm not going to talk about Google or Apple or Samsung. Those are all familiar to you. Something unfamiliar. Unfamiliar culture. Culturally too, nothing like Seoul culture or Chicago culture. Completely different culture in India. So how does a process, a generic process and a set of generic principles can be adopted to suit different cultures? That's why I'm showing you an extreme example of an unfamiliar project. This was done by a company called Godrej. Godrej, an Indian company. It's a group of companies, but they produce refrigerators and furniture, locks, a lot of products they produce. And the project is called Chotu Cool. It's about a refrigerator. Chotu Cool is an Indian name. It means small, cool, small refrigerator. So the project is about a refrigerator that is made for poor people, right? That's why it's called a small cool. Let me show you that example. At that time, this project was done about 3 years ago. It was initiated 4 years ago, probably. At that time, Godrej was producing refrigerators. A lot of other companies were also producing refrigerators in India or in the world, right? Whirlpool and all kinds of companies were producing. The industry model was to produce refrigerators like this, right? To fit into some kind of a modern kitchen. That is, the entire industry model is for producing fridges that will fit into a modern kitchen. But the Indian people, Godrej asked them, they were doing the initial sensing intent. Where do I innovate? Right? The reframing, the early phase of reframing. Should we continue to make fridges like that? We can continue to make fridges like that. Or can we reframe the entire industry model? So they asked themselves, how many people use refrigerators like that in India? Only 20%, the top 20% of India's population can afford to use refrigerators like this. What happens to the 80%? What happens to the 80% of India's population who cannot access refrigerators like that? They don't have refrigerators like that. They cannot have anything like that, right? So Godrej, that's a good opportunity. We can reframe. Let us reframe a refrigerator industry model and create a new refrigerator, new innovation that 80% of the people can afford to buy or have. And that will be revolutionary, right? That's totally changing the humanity level of innovations, right? That's what they took on. So at that time, the 80% of the population, refrigerator might look like that. In their house, they don't have a refrigerator. It is a bunch of vessels filled with water. They're stacked and covered with a wet cloth, right? The wet cloth, because of the evaporative cooling, produces the temperature difference, about 5 degree, 4 degree, 5 degree temperature difference to the water. That's all what the refrigerator for the 80% of the people. So that's a big reframing that Godrej was ready to take on. Of course, they could have reframed it that way, right? Let's take the big refrigerator and make it smaller and cheaper, right? It would have failed instantaneously because that's not the answer. The answer is to create a refrigerator that is affordable to the 80% of people. So you have to study the people, their context, their needs and their behaviors, everything, and build a refrigerator based on that context. And so that would have been a total disaster. So the Godrej team did exactly what the design thinking process did, knowing the context, knowing the people, and all those phases, 7 phases they applied on the project. Knowing context was a lot of observational research going into rural India. 80% of the population, where do they live? Rural areas, not in cities, in the rural villages. They are spread all over India. So you have to go there. Sometimes there are not even roads to go to some of those rural areas. So the team went to all these rural areas, started observing, started talking to people, and a whole lot of insights. Insights like this. This is the early morning scene in a village in India where women walk about 10 miles every day morning to the river nearby so that they can get water in vessels and come back 10 miles so that they can have fresh water to cook or drink. You have to pay, as a refrigerator company, you have to pay attention to those kind of contextual behaviors and cultural behaviors, right? Similarly, knowing context was also, this is Sweta, one of the Godrej team members, right? Research happens this way. Contextual research, understanding people or knowing people happens that way, that you really have to immerse yourself into people's lives. You have to know them like friends, right? To know their behaviors. So, of course, one of the insight is that personal recommendations are more important than advertising. When You might think that in this rural situation, advertising will work like any other place. Like here, when you buy a product, advertising matters. Right? When it is advertised, you can buy the product. But rural villages, people don't pay any attention to advertising, especially in India. But personal recommendations work. My mom told me that this product is good, I'll buy it. Or my friend told me this is good, that product is good, I'll buy it. The personal recommendations. So can you build on that? So I'm giving you a lot of examples of insight that we have learned from the context by mingling with people. Similarly, another insight was local NGOs. NGO is non-governmental organizations. They are sort of voluntary organizations trying to help the community. A lot of them in Indian rural villages. These organizations come and teach children. They come and provide healthcare services to families. They're very important in the life of people. This non-governmental organization, voluntary organization trying to help your family. Unlike in Western cultures, we don't have anything in Western cultures like that. So things like that is important, and knowing people. Again, research happens that way. This is the Godrej team. Sanjay is actually project leader. Sanjay is the project leader. You're doing research, right? In villages, this is his team. This guy is writing notes, right? Asking questions to these women about their cooking and about their needs, about life, and having a conversation with them, trying to find out what their behaviors are, right? So that's the kind of immersion that we need to do to really make a difference in innovation. And another insight is this woman, she runs a small vending shop, sells vegetables on the street side. So when people go home, they stop by these vegetable stores, buy vegetables for cooking for that evening. And if she can't sell all the vegetables in one evening, and she can't store it overnight, there's no refrigerator she has, it's a lot of waste. The business is affected. Anything that most of her inventory is wasted at the end of the day, right? Because she can't sell everything in a day's time. So it's a very inefficient model, inefficient and kind of inhuman model, right? If she had a refrigerator, if she had some way of storing those materials, her life would have been much better. So, framing insights. With all those insights, you have to look for patterns, and some of the things that we learned from those insights is a cheap refrigerator is not just a solution. Don't make a refrigerator just cheap. All right? Need to meet aspirations of a more inclusive society. What it means is that in village life, the people are so connected together. So you have to include them in any change that they will take. You have to include them. So inclusive innovation is important. You have to give them some ownership. You cannot just go there and sell stuff. It doesn't work that way. But if you go there and talk to people and include them in the process, then magic happens. Then real things happen. So refrigerator has to be some kind of an inclusive process. It's not just a corporation coming and dumping products on the society. Right? So those are the, and then of course design principles, a list of design principles came out of that. Many of the principles were product related. So, sorry. You can see, the refrigerator has to have a small footprint, needs to be mobile, allows for easy servicing. Those are all product principles. Like any typical, we do that all the time in our engineering products. Product specific, we call it product specifications, right? But a lot of those principles are about life, not about product. Fits into people's daily lifestyle, supports village and family life, right? Anything that you produce as a refrigerator should support family life in the village. So principles are gone beyond product specifications into lifestyle principles, right? So that's what we have to pay attention to. And then, of course, exploring concept. Sanjay, the team leader, once he had ideas, he made small models, home core kind of models, and went back into the villages and testing out whether it will work. Testing out by including the families in the conversation for testing. Then they feel much more inclusive in developing the product, much more successful. So that's the kind of reiterated product prototyping going on. And while this is all going on, engineers were hard at work. Right? This is going on by designers going into the villages and testing out all this. While the design and other kinds of activities were going on, engineers were hard at work. So that's where the convergence happens, right? They were doing research on developing new techniques or technologies to make the cooling happen in the lowest possible cost. And it has to be mobile. One of the requirements was the fridge has to be mobile. People will have to carry it around. That's how the village style works, and it's not just sitting at one place. So how can a refrigerator be mobile, light enough to be mobile, and cost effective? That was a challenge the engineers were taking on. And they came out with what is called solid state cooling and electronic chip based cooling. No, there's no compressor, there's no refrigerator. Compressor is the heavy thing, and refrigerant is the complex part of the refrigerator. Eliminating all that, they invented a chip. Chip is only 4 millimeter by 4 millimeter by 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter thickness. That is a chip that could produce enough cooling. What is needed is enough cooling. You don't have to extra cool in those village situations. Enough cooling, just the right cooling to preserve the food for overnight, right? So that's all that is needed, that the chip was able to do that. Solid state thermoelectric cooling chip, they invented it, and it was cost effective and it started working. So in the product, that is what is used, light in weight, and a whole lot of other things that the engineers were solving at the same time in discussion with the designers and the needs that were required to meet. And not only that, you can see 600 women from the village participating in an evaluation exercise, prototype evaluation, right? These women were invited from various villages around. They were invited, we were testing, the team was testing civil and a lot of discussion in that community setting going on. Will this work for you? What can we do? How can we change things? Can we make it better? So in that session, they got a lot of evaluative insights to make things better. Again, the idea of inclusiveness, that make people participate in the process. Then they feel much more attached to the innovation. And of course, the right innovation come out of that. And of course, engineers, designers, and business folks collaborate on the solutions. In the Godrej labs, they're always collaborating. Engineers working with business people and designers, collaborating even on the design, research, and everything. And this is another innovation. While they were framing solutions, well, they were coming out with solutions, the big question was, the 80% of the population are in the villages all over India. They're spread out. How to deliver? Godrej did not have a distribution mechanism, infrastructure, to reach all those villages, remote villages. So how to deliver this product to the remotest corner of India? So they were puzzled, they were almost failing because of delivery, the whole system was failing. But they came out with a good partnership innovation with Indian Postal Service. Indian Postal Service, as you know, is one of the most efficient postal services in the whole world. If you mail a letter, mail a letter to the remotest corner of someone living in the remotest corner, the mail will arrive there somehow. Mail delivery happens. I don't know how it happened, but it happens, right? So they, Godrej partnered with Indian Postal Service, and there are about thousands of post offices in all these, post offices means small kiosk-like places in all these villages, and Godrej partnered with them to use the post offices as retail centers, as maintenance centers and repair centers for these products, for this refrigerator. So that way delivery and distribution system was magically taken care of by the Postal Service. That's a fantastic innovation of partnering with another organization. And of course, finally you can see how the village women took ownership, and the women was given distributorship, and women in the villages are entrepreneurs. They run small businesses. They took initiative in selling the refrigerators. They took initiative in promoting the refrigerators. So here is how we can see women sort of launching the product like a bride. Right? You put the bride on a thing and then carry the bride with flowers around. That's the kind of ownership that they took to promote the refrigerator. So there are wonderful effects on the success of the innovation. And even beyond that, women entrepreneurs became trainers. Trainers, when they will explain, using simple flip charts, they will explain how to use the product. If there's a small problem, how to fix it, right? They were explaining maintenance techniques to the villagers in very simple flip chart kind of technique. Not very high tech, but it works. Right? So those are the kinds of innovations. And more than the refrigerator, the success of this innovation is that it completely transformed the community in those areas, because, as I said, women play a big role in those villages, and they are entrepreneurs. They start their own businesses, and if they were given, they were the salespeople, they were distributors, they were maintenance people, right? And women could start their own business because of this chotu-kur, and they became job for them, right? The prosperity level started moving up. General prosperity level started moving up. So not just a refrigerator, it had an impact on the society and the economics of the society as a whole, right? By being carefully innovating, by including people, and people like this guy who has a small kiosk, he is a small shop, right? The moment he had a small refrigerator, his business went up because he could sell beverages really cool and charge a premium for cool beverages, and his business went up. And so there is general elevation of prosperity in those societies. That cannot be underestimated, right? The impact of design at that level can be tremendously satisfying, not only from the business perspective, but the society point of view. Of course, right now they are extending the same idea into other markets. They are transforming the same chotu-kur idea into even urban population. People living in cities reframe chotu-kur that they can buy and they can use it for vacationing or touring and things like that. So which is a sort of modern city version of the product. That's what they are doing now. So this project is a great success story of reframing and applying the right mental model or mindset in very carefully, very thoughtfully into a large population, having a big impact on the society. That's why I took that up. And of course, if you look at the toolkit, they must have used about 15, the red highlighted ones are the tools that are used in this project. 15 out of the 101 tools, methods were used in this project. So it's an indication that you have the methods toolkit, you don't have to use all 101 in one project. Depending upon your project, you can select the right methods to be applied, to be used. So I leave it there with the final thought that You can question the current models yourself, reframe the world that we live in, take a completely different perspective. This is a real perspective of the globe, right? It's an unusual perspective. You don't expect to look at the globe that way. You see only Pacific Ocean. You don't see countries and continents, but still a real view, that unusual view, right? Unusual perspective. So let us work together, questioning orthodoxies, and come out with new ideas, new perspectives that can make the world much better. Thank you.
네, 맞습니다. 안녕하세요. 저는 캐나다의 칼튼 대학이라는 곳에서 교수를 하고 있는 정원주라고 합니다. Thank you, Vijay, for your presentation. I have one very important question for you. You showed the 7 modes, which is kind of the stage of your design process and innovation process. And I'm just wondering if I'm planning to have some interdisciplinary collaboration team, and then where is the appropriate or proper stage or location that I employ or that I use the interdisciplinary collaboration team? Is that from knowing context or from sense intent to the end, or is there any proper location that you may think for interdisciplinary collaborations?
Good question. Ideally, the team will have to, the multidisciplinary team will have to go through all 7 modes, ideally. But it doesn't happen ideally. The same, designers, engineers, business people, finance people many times don't participate in the early phases, right? So the composition of the multidisciplinary teams will change as you go along, depending upon which part of the project is. So I'll give you an example. So, for example, if you are in the early phases of research, knowing people, knowing context, majority of the people should be designers and research people. You don't really need a financial expert at that stage because it's about research, right? So that's one situation. Research should be heavily weighed towards designers and researchers, and engineers should play a little bit of role in the early phase of research. Framing insights and exploring ideas, I think, should be done by all, because exploring ideas especially should be done by everyone. Even the financial experts should be there because it will be finance-related innovations. Researchers should be there, engineers should be there because technology-related innovations. They all will have to come together. Implementation side, you can reduce the involvement of researchers and possibly the conceptual designers, more of engineers, more of financial planners, more of business planners will have to play the implementation side. So that's it's a common sense, very commonsensical division that you have to take depending upon the project.
It sounds to me that you're saying, based on your saying, the designer should be involved in the very early stage to the end. Is that?
Yes. Designer should play a major role throughout. And engineers and business people, finance people can come in and go at various stages.
Thank you. 네, 앞에 계신 분. 마이크
John.
저는 이번에 ID를 졸업한 이영석이라고 하고요. Vijay, I know a lot of companies in the US wants to adopt design thinking process and methods, so they do have much easier access to hiring ID students, and also it's much easier for them to adopt these processes. But for Korea, it's a little bit harder for the companies to reach out to the students and hire them. So what is the basic way, or where the company should start to create a form of design thinking? And also another question is, for companies, the the structure or the hierarchy could be very rigid or very soft. For soft companies, it would be much easier for them to adopt the new design thinking process. But for most companies, which is very rigid, it's very hard for them to change. And I do think the communication plays an important role in order to adopt and actually execute the design thinking. Can you explain where the company should start and what kind of mindsets or what kind of thinkings that people should have within the company?
Yeah, good question. Several ways. First of all, the companies will have to acquire the competency to do design thinking, acquire the competence to be good at approaching problems this way in a structured methodological way. The competency is so key, right? How do they acquire competency? That's the next question, right? You can normally competencies can be acquired by bringing new people. That's one way, or training the internal people. That is another way, or a combination of these, training internal people as well as bringing new people, or you can partner with another design firm who can bring in that competency. There are different ways. Having said that, how do you develop competencies? I think there are three ways in which you can develop competencies by companies. One is creating awareness across the company, awareness about this design process. That can be done through presentations or demonstrations within the company, so that everyone is aware. Oh, there is a structured process that we can apply. That is awareness. Can be done through presentations and exchanges and conversations. The second is experience. Give people the experience of the process. So that goes beyond presentations. You have to engage people in small workshop sessions. Maybe bring in some outside expert to conduct a workshop in which the participants can be given the experience of going through this. So experience will have deeper effect. But that alone is not enough. Competency still doesn't come. The third level is developing competency. That's when probably you have to actually work on project. The most practical way in which companies adopt this competency is they create one project. Let's create a project. Let's use this design thinking process and then bring in whatever resources outside or inside and do the project. They could be outside consultants who will be working with them for almost 6 months and the project is going on. And the team will learn through those sessions, and once they do one project, then they are competent to do another project. That's a long-term commitment that we have to make. So awareness, experience, and competence can be done this way. And your question about hiring, right? How do we hire ID students or any other students? That's a simple recruitment, simple HR strategy that you have to take. You look at your company composition right now. Where are the gaps? Where are the strengths? And depending upon that, you have to make a decision. And lots of ID is a good place. Lots of design schools are producing great designers who can work this way these days.
있습니다. 저희가 2년간 걸쳐서 원어원 디자인 메소드를
Just hold on. Let me put my. Okay, go ahead.
예, 저희가 2년 정도 원어원 디자인 메소드를 한국어로 번역을 다 완료를 했는데요. 저는 책에서 프로세스와 이제 메소돌로지가 아주 생활이 편하게 잘 정리가 되어 있었는데, 제가 학생들을 가르치거나 아니면 기업에서 프로젝트를 진행하거나 아니면 컨설팅을 진행할 때 가끔은 프로세스보다 더 중요한 무언가가 있다는 생각을 가끔 합니다. 그래서 프로세스를 굳이 지도를 하지 않아도 더 좋은 솔루션이나 이제 해결책들이 나오는 경우를 많이 봤을 때 디자이너들이 가져야 될 기본적인 어떤 소양 아니면 마인드셋 이런 것들이 어떤 것들이 조금 더 염두에 좀 두면서 프로젝트를 진행을 하거나 아니면 지도하는 일에 신경 써야 될지 그런 점들이 좀 궁금합니다.
Good question. What is the role of designers as they do the project? What is the role of designers for teaching what they know across the company? Right? Great question. That goes into, I think the answer to that is a bigger question, especially in Korean culture. Right? In organization, how do you really make a cultural difference in terms of knowing design thinking and applying? Some of the methods that we have talked about in the book have to be reframed and reformatted and changed to adapt to cultural nuances or cultural differences. For example, yesterday, John and I was talking about exactly the same point. For example, Korean culture or Japanese culture and Chinese culture, it's well-known fact that in organization there is a hierarchical structure. Right? Hierarchy matters. Right? Hierarchy matters. The leaders in the company are decision makers. They don't want, probably many times refuse to sort of participate in lower level work. For example, brainstorming as a common technique for exploring ideas. If you bring that into that hierarchical model, it could fail. It could fail because if you bring in leaders or different people from different levels into one group, everyone does not think about ideas. Everyone doesn't think that it's their responsibility to come out with new ideas. Brainstorming is all about coming out with new ideas. So it could fail. So you have to reframe the brainstorming method in a different way to work in that cultural context. Maybe brainwriting. Instead of talking about ideas, you can ask the participant to write their ideas. Then there's a better chance that people with different levels of hierarchy can do that. It can be much more successful. So the methods will have to be tailored to the company culture, first of all. And secondly, designers. Your question about how designers should participate in the work as well as teach. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the beginning stages when the entire company is trying to create a culture of innovation. Designers can take the lead role. Earlier we talked about the championship role. Designers should take the championship role, not only doing the project as a demonstration, but also teaching others. Right? So in my opinion, lots of companies are doing that. A lot of my students are doing that. They're champions in a new organization trying to develop this new competency. They take on that role of a champion, not only demonstrating the value of design thinking, but also teaching others in the process. So that's a good practice.
네.
반갑습니다, 교수님. 장시간 강연하시느라 많이 힘드셨을 텐데 좀 감사드립니다. 좋은 강연 감사드리고요. 저는 그 UDI라고 환경 디자인을 기반으로 한 기술과 LED를 융합해서 제품을 생산하고 있는 대표 최정민이라고 합니다. 간단하게 한 가지가 좀 인상 깊었던 사례 때문에 여쭤보고 싶은 건데요. 그 고드레라는 기업이 실질적으로 제품을 개발해서 사례를 변화시키고 한 것은 지속 가능한 그런 디자인 사례에서 저는 굉장히 인상 깊게 좀 들었습니다. 근데 한 가지 좀 실질적으로 궁금한 게 기업이 그런 제품을 개발하기 위해서 투여한 시간이나 이런 마지막 솔루션이 나올 때까지 실질적으로 얼마나 많은 기간이 얼마나 많은 기간이 소요되었는지, 그리고 이후에 손익분기점이 과연 언제쯤 발생이 되었는지가 실질적으로 궁금했습니다.
Good question. About Godrich, give you a rough. I don't know exactly how long the project was. It was done 4 years ago. The actual development from the starting point to putting Chodukul in the marketplace was about 2.5 years. The first product came out in the market in 2.5 years' time. So there's a lot of research, a lot of development work happening in 2.5 years' time. And then there's another iteration from 2.5 years to 4 years. There was another version 2 iteration. Now the version 2 is in the marketplace after 1.5 years. So that's the nature. And then your question about break-even point. I'm still yet to get the statistics about that, the break-even point. But I'm pretty sure it'll be the version 2, between the version 2 and the version 1, or somewhere there was the break-even point. Because version 2 is highly beyond profitability. That's why they came out with version 2. But I think version 1 was less profitable in the beginning, probably about 6 months to 1 year. It would have been fully out of profit.
네, 아까 하셨는데 이거 좀 보태서 네.
보통 we okay if I could speaker
Sure, yeah.
and just gonna tell everybody the process.
Yeah.
보통 저희 학교에서 이제 프로젝트를 맡게 되면은 보통 한 3개월 정도 프로젝트가 이제 시간이 걸리는데요. 그게 이제 리서치서부터 시작을 해서 이제 컨셉 데어먼트까지, 그러니까 실제 디자이너들이 디자인해서 프로토타입 나온 데까지가 보통 한 3개월을 보통 프로젝트 많이 자는데, 저희가 작년 여름에 브라질에 있는 이타우라는 그 민간 최대은행에서 또 프로젝트 했었는데요. 그건 한 3주 만에 이렇게 프로세스를 뺀 적이 있거든요. 그건 보통 서비스 디자인이었었는데, 물론 이제 이렇게 방식을 아는 사람들이 주요를 하다 보니까 프로세스가 더 짧아지고 또 생각하는 게 더 빨라지는 그런 장점이 있었습니다. 그래서 보통 저도 이제 다른 이제 한국 기업에 계신 분들하고 얘기를 하다 보면은 이 디자인 थिं킹 프로세스가 과연 개발 기간을 얼마나 차지하냐, 그거는 프로젝트마다 좀 이렇게 다르겠지만 굉장히 짧을 수도 있고 길 수도 있다고 생각합니다.
Thanks, John. By the way, John was my favorite student. He just graduated, and we have a few other ID alumni too, right? Yu Jong Lee was here. Yeah, he was here. And Won Jun Chan, yeah, there is Won Jun Chan. And maybe one more, yeah. So ID students are really, I just want to sort of thank you guys for many of you initiated this event. Also, Won Jun Chan, your initiative resulted in this. So you have to appreciate your initiative. And there's quite a lot of ID students in Korea making a big difference in Korean companies like Samsung and LG Electronics and SK Telecom and things like that. I just want to bring that up.
디자인의 방향이 이렇게 테크놀로지하고 결합되는 부분이 많이 강조되면서 IIT의 그런 저력이나 이런 게 또 더 발휘되고 있는 시기인 것 같습니다. 앞쪽에 그 팀벌 클락 손주현 질문을 마지막으로 한 분만 받겠습니다. 저는 시간 관계상 조금 추가적으로 질문이 있으신 분들은 좀 남으셔서 교수님께 좀 양해를 구하고 몇 분 정도만 더 하고요. 손주현.
Okay.
보여주신 그 이노베이션 케이스 스터디도 굉장히 인상적이었는데요. 저도. 근데 이게 프로젝트가 사실은 좀 어떻게 보면 비즈니스, 아까 프로덕트 이노베이션이라기보다는 비즈니스 이노베이션에 굉장히 가까운 것 같은데, 그 프로젝트 하실 때 디자이너의 어떤 맡은 역할과 어떤 컨트리뷰션을 공헌했는지 알고 싶고요. 두 번째로는 그거와 좀 관련해서 저도 이제 디자인 관련 종사자로서 그 디자이너가 이런 크로스 펑셔널 팀의 리더 역할을 해야 된다고 굳게 믿고 있는데요. 사실 현실에서는 어떤 서포터, 조력자 역할로서만 끝이 나는 경우가 많은데, 그 사실 어떤 기업 입장에서 보면 이노베이션 솔루션만 나오기만 하면 뭐 디자이너가 조력자 역할을 하던 서포터를 하던 리더가 되든 상관이 없는데, 어떤 경우가 좀 더 나은 그 이노베이션 솔루션이 나오고 혹시 실제 그런 사례들이 더 많은지 그런 점들이 좀 궁금합니다.
Yes. in this particular project, designers did play a lead role because we adopted design thinking process, first of all, the process that we mentioned. So it was the leading role was by designers, and they facilitated, they led, and they coordinated involvement from engineers and business people and financial people. So normally, in my experience, the students that go out of IIT are trained. They get so much of exposure about various disciplines. They do a lot of business courses, a lot of technology courses, a lot of design courses. They're trained to talk the language. They understand the language of all these professions. So they are much better equipped to be the leaders. For leaders, if you know how to talk the language of all the other disciplines, they can be much better leaders. So the design thinkers nowadays are trained to be working at that level. So they naturally take a leadership role. Even in the project, the Godrej project, most of the leaders were design trained people, right? That made a big difference. Now the second part of the question is how designers' role should change, right? Yeah, absolutely. That designer's role should be about leaders, about taking leadership. But I'll take one more step beyond that. That's the idea of champion, right? It's not just about leadership in one team, one project. Can they become beyond that? They can become a champion. Champion is much deeper than a leader. Champion means making a big impact on the organization as a champion. So through demonstrating one team project through their leadership, can they demonstrate and influence other teams and create an innovation culture within the organization? That is a much bigger role that designers will have to take on, the championship role. Not only designers, anyone can take on that role, but designers are probably much more equipped to do that. Thank you.
네, 장시간 동안 자리 지키면서 진지하게 그 세미나에 임해주셔서 너무 고맙습니다. 긴 시간 강의해주신 비제이 쿠마 교수님도 다시 한번 박수 부탁드립니다.